Jake Morrison sat at his desk and stared at the screens in front of him. The numbers on the displays never changed. The alien ship outside the space station had been silent for 3 months now. Every day Jake watched it through the big windows. And every day it did nothing at all. The other people on Deep Space Station Omega-7 had stopped paying attention to the strange ship weeks ago. They had jobs to do, and the silent vessel was not their problem anymore. Commander Lisa Hayes had tried everything to make contact with the ship, but nothing worked. Dr. Kevin Martinez ran tests on it every day, but learned nothing new. Chief Engineer Carol Davis studied its design, but could not understand how it was built. Security Chief Ryan Brooks watched it carefully, but the ship never moved or did anything threatening. Jake was different from the others. His job was to listen for messages from the alien ship, but there were never any messages. Most people would find this boring, but Jake found the ship fascinating. When he was not working, he would go to the observation deck and look at the beautiful curves of its hull. The ship was not like human ships at all. It looked smooth and alive somehow. The metal seemed to flow like water that had been frozen in place. The ship had appeared 3 months ago without warning. It came through their defense systems like they were not even there. No alarms went off. No weapons fired at it. The ship just appeared near the station and stopped moving. Everyone expected it to attack or send a message or do something, but it did nothing. It just floated there in space, like a sleeping giant. Jake had grown up dreaming of meeting aliens. When he joined the Space Force, he hoped he would be the first human to talk to beings from another world. Now here was an alien ship right outside his window, and it would not talk to anyone. This made Jake feel frustrated, but also curious. Why? Would aliens come all this way just to stay silent? During his work shifts, Jake would monitor all the communication channels. He would scan for any signal from the alien ship. He would try different frequencies and different types of signals. Sometimes he would even try to send simple mathematical patterns to the ship, hoping it would respond. Nothing ever worked. The ship remained as quiet as a stone got at night. When most of the station crew was sleeping, Jake would often go to the observation lounge. He would sit in the dark and watch the alien ship. Sometimes he thought he could see patterns of light moving across its surface, but the sensors never detected anything. The other crew members thought Jake was wasting his time. They said he was becoming obsessed with the ship. Betty Ross was Jake's closest friend on the station. She worked in communications too, and understood why Jake was so interested in the alien vessel. She would sometimes sit with him in the observation lounge, and they would talk about what the aliens might be like. Betty thought the ship was beautiful, but also a little scary. Jake thought it was the most amazing thing he had ever seen. This ship was about twice the size of their space station. Its hull was a dark gray color that seemed to change depending on the light. Sometimes it looked almost black, and sometimes it had a blue or green tint to it. The shape was unlike any human ship. Instead of straight lines and sharp angles, the alien vessel had smooth curves that flowed into each other. It looked more like something that had grown naturally than something that had been built. Dr. Martinez had theories about the ship. He thought it might be a scout vessel sent ahead of a larger fleet. He worried that it was studying human technology and defenses. Security Chief Brooks agreed with this theory and wanted to destroy the ship before it could report back to its home world. Commander Hayes refused to attack the ship because it had not shown any hostile actions. Jake disagreed with both of them. He did not think the ship was there to spy on humans or to prepare for an invasion. He felt like the ship was waiting for something or someone. Sometimes when he looked at it, he got the strange feeling that it was looking back at him. This was impossible, of course, because the ship had no visible windows or sensors pointed toward the station, but the feeling was strong. On quiet nights, Jake would dream about the alien ship. In his dreams, he would walk through corridors that pulsed with soft light. He would see strange symbols on the walls that somehow made sense to him. He would sit in a chair that felt like it was made just for him, and he would understand how to control systems that did not exist in human technology. When he woke up from these dreams, Jake felt confused and excited at the same time. The night everything changed started like any other night. Jake was alone on the late shift monitoring the communication systems. Most of the station crew was asleep. Only the essential systems were running, and the corridors were dark and quiet. Jake was drinking coffee and reading reports when he noticed something different outside the window. The alien ship was glowing. Soft patterns of blue and white light were moving across its hull, like water flowing over smooth stones. Jake had never seen anything like it before. He called up the sensor readings, but the instruments showed nothing unusual. According to the computers, the ship was exactly the same as always, but Jake could see with his own eyes that something had changed. He moved closer to the observation window and pressed his face against the cool glass. The patterns of light on the ship's hull seemed to respond to his movement. They became brighter and more complex. Jake could see designs that reminded him of flowing rivers or growing plants. The lights were beautiful and somehow familiar, even though he had never seen anything like them before. Then the ship moved. For the first time in 3 months, the alien vessel changed position. It turned slowly and carefully until what looked like its front section was pointing directly at the observation window where Jake was standing. The movement was deliberate and purposeful. The ship was looking at him. Jake's heart began beating faster. His hands were shaking as he reached for his communication headset. He activated the emergency channel that would alert Commander Hayes and the other senior officers. But before he could speak, he heard something that made him freeze. Through his headset came a single word spoken in perfect, clear English. The voice was neither male nor female, but somehow both at the same time. The word was simple, but it changed everything. Captain. Jake Morrison stood frozen at the observation window with his communication headset still in his hands. The word captain echoed in his mind like a bell that would not stop ringing. He looked out at the alien ship, which was now clearly focused on his position. The flowing patterns of light across its hull had become even more complex and beautiful. Commander Hayes arrived at the observation deck within minutes of Jake's emergency alert. She was followed by Dr. Martinez, security chief, Brooks, and several other senior officers. They all stared out at the alien ship, which was still glowing with its strange patterns of light. Jake tried to explain what had happened, but his words came out jumbled and confused. "It spoke to me," Jake said. "It called me captain. I heard it through my headset as clear as I can hear you right now." Security Chief Brooks looked skeptical. "Are you sure you did not imagine it, Morrison? You have been staring at that ship for months. Maybe your mind is playing tricks on you." But Dr. Martinez was already checking the sensor logs and communication records. His face grew pale as he read the data on his portable computer. "He is telling the truth," the doctor said quietly. The sensors recorded an energy burst from the alien ship at exactly the time Morrison recorded hearing the voice. Something definitely happened here. Commander Hayes studied the glowing ship through the observation window. The patterns of light were still moving across its surface, but they seemed dimmer now that Jake had stepped away from the glass. "Why would it call you Captain Morrison? You are a junior communications officer. If this ship wanted to contact our leadership, it should be talking to me." Jake had no answer for that question. He was as confused as everyone else about why the alien ship had chosen to speak to him instead of the senior officers. But deep inside, he felt something had changed. The voice calling him captain had awakened something in his mind that had been sleeping. He could not explain what it was, But he knew his life would never be the same. The next morning brought chaos to the space station. News of the alien ship's first communication spread quickly through the crew. Everyone wanted to know what it meant and why it had happened, now after months of silence. Commander Hayes called an emergency meeting of all senior staff to discuss what should be done next. Dr. Martinez presented his analysis of the event to the assembled officers. Based on the energy readings and the timing of the communication, I believe the ship has been studying us for the past 3 months. It has been learning our language, our social structures, and our command hierarchies. The fact that it addressed Morrison as captain suggests it understands our military ranking system, but that still does not explain why it chose Morrison, Security Chief Brooks said with suspicion in his voice. What makes a junior officer special enough to warrant direct contact from an alien intelligence? Jake found himself subjected to countless tests and examinations over the next few days. The medical team ran genetic scans and brain imaging studies. The psychology department gave him personality tests and cognitive evaluations. The intelligence officers questioned him about his background and family history. Nothing they found explained why the alien ship had singled him out for contact. Betty Ross noticed changes in Jake that the official tests missed. She had known him for 2 years and could see that something fundamental had shifted in her friend. "You are different, Jake," she told him during a private conversation in the mess hall. "More focused somehow, more confident. It is like you have been preparing for something without knowing it." Jake could not argue with her observation. Since hearing the ship call him captain, he had been experiencing strange dreams and sudden insights. Sometimes he would wake up with knowledge about star navigation that he had never learned. Other times he would understand technical concepts that were beyond his training. It was as if information was being downloaded directly into his brain while he slept. The alien ship remained active during this time. Whenever Jake was near an observation window, the patterns of light on its hull would intensify and become more complex. The ship seemed to be responding to his presence in a way that it did not respond to anyone else. This made the senior officers both curious and nervous. Dr. Martinez decided to test whether the ship would communicate again. He set up a direct communication array pointed at the alien vessel and asked Jake to operate it. Jake sat at the controls and tried sending simple mathematical sequences and basic greeting messages. For several hours, nothing happened. Then, just as Jake was about to give up, the ship responded. The voice came through the communication array, clearly enough for everyone in the room to hear. It was the same voice Jake had heard before, neither male nor female, but somehow both. The words were in perfect English, with no accent or hesitation. "Captain Morrison, I have been waiting for you to accept your role. Your species shows great promise, but you require guidance to reach your potential." Commander Hayes stepped forward and spoke into the communication array. "This is Commander Lisa Hayes, commanding officer of Deep Space Station Omega-7. I am the senior officer here. If you wish to communicate with human leadership, you should address your messages to me." The alien ship was quiet for several minutes. Then the voice returned, but it was clearly addressing Jake and not the commander. "Captain Morrison, your superior officer does not understand the nature of our connection. You were chosen long before your birth for this purpose. The genetic markers in your bloodline mark you as one who can bond with my systems." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean by genetic markers? What is special about my bloodline? Your ancestors carried genetic modifications placed there by my creators millions of years ago. These modifications have been passed down through countless generations, waiting for the right combination to appear. You are that combination, Captain Morrison. You are what we have been searching for." Security Chief Brooks drew his weapon and pointed it at Jake. This could be some kind of alien mind control. Morrison might be compromised. We should place him in isolation until we understand what is happening. But before Brooks could act, the alien ship's defensive systems activated. Brilliant blue energy fields surrounded both the ship and the space station. Every weapon system on the station went offline. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power grid struggled to compensate for the energy drain. The message was clear. The alien ship would protect Jake from any threat. Commander Hayes ordered Brooks to lower his weapon. The situation was beyond anything they had trained for, and aggressive actions would only make things worse. She looked at Jake with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Morrison, do you have any idea what this ship wants from you?" Jake stared out at the glowing alien vessel and felt something stirring deep in his mind. Images flashed through his consciousness. Star charts showing the locations of other ships like this one scattered across the galaxy. Technical diagrams of systems that could reshape matter at the molecular level. The faces of beings from dozens of different worlds, all connected by the same genetic markers that apparently flowed through his own DNA. "I think," Jake said slowly, "it wants me to become something I was always meant to be. It wants me to be its captain." The alien ship pulsed with brighter light, as if responding to his words. The voice came through the communication array 1. More time before the transmission ended. "When you are ready to accept your destiny, Captain Morrison, I will be waiting. Together, we will restore the harmony that once existed between the stars." Jake knew his life as a simple communications officer was over. Whatever he was becoming, whatever the ship needed him to be, there was no going back to the way things were before. The alien vessel had chosen him for reasons he was only beginning to understand, and the galaxy itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Jake Morrison could not sleep. For 3 days, since the alien ship had revealed the truth about his genetic heritage, he had been plagued by vivid dreams that felt more like memories. He saw star systems he had never visited and understood technologies that human science could not explain. The dreams were becoming stronger each night, and Jake knew they were not just random images from his subconscious mind. At 3 in the morning, Jake found himself getting dressed in his work uniform. He moved quietly through the corridors of the space station, trying not to wake anyone. His feet carried him toward the equipment bay where the EVA suits were stored. He did not consciously decide to go there, but something deep in his mind was driving him forward. Betty Ross found him in the equipment bay, pulling on an environmental suit. She had been unable to sleep too, and had come looking for her friend when she discovered his quarters were empty. "Jake, what are you doing?" "If Commander Hayes finds you suiting up without authorization, she will have you thrown in the brig." Jake paused in his preparations and looked at his friend. Betty could see something different in his eyes. They held a certainty and purpose that had not been there before. "I have to go to the ship, Betty. I can feel it calling to me. Every night the dreams get stronger, and I know more about what I am supposed to do. The ship is not just alien technology. It is alive somehow, and it needs me." "This is crazy, Jake. You cannot just float over to an alien vessel by yourself. What if it is dangerous? What if you cannot get back?" Betty grabbed his arm, trying to stop him from sealing his helmet. Jake gently removed her hand from his arm. "Monitor my suit telemetry from the communications center. If something goes wrong, you will know immediately. But I do not think anything bad will happen. The ship has been protecting me from the beginning. It will not hurt me now." Jake sealed his helmet and moved toward the airlock. Betty watched helplessly as her friend prepared to do something that could get him killed or worse. She wanted to alert Commander Hayes, but she also knew that Jake was right about one thing. The alien ship had been protecting him, and it had shown no signs of hostile intent toward humans in general. The moment Jake stepped out of the airlock and into open space, the alien ship responded. A soft blue-white beam of energy surrounded him like a gentle hand guiding him forward. Jake felt no fear as he was pulled toward the smooth hull of the vessel. He had dreamed of this moment for days, and everything was happening exactly as he had seen in his sleep. As Jake approached the ship's hull, a section of the smooth surface began to change. The solid metal flowed like liquid and formed an opening large enough for him to pass through. The edges of the opening glowed with the same soft light that covered the rest of the ship. Jake allowed the tractor beam to guide him through the opening and into the alien vessel. The interior of the ship was unlike anything humans had ever built. The corridors were organic in appearance, with walls that curved and flowed like the inside of a living creature. Veins of bioluminescent material ran along the surfaces, providing gentle lighting that seemed to respond to Jake's presence. As he moved forward, the lights would brighten ahead of him and dim behind him, creating a path through the ship. Jake did not need directions to find his way. The dreams had shown him the route to the command center many times. He moved through corridors that opened before him and sealed behind him. The ship was guiding his journey and making sure he reached his destination safely. Sometimes the walls became transparent, allowing him to see other sections of the vessel filled with technology he could not begin to understand. The command center was the heart of the ship. Jake emerged from the organic corridors into a large, circular chamber dominated by a single chair in the center. The chair appeared to be grown rather than built with smooth curves that would perfectly fit a human body. Around the chair were displays and control surfaces that activated as Jake approached them. The walls of the command center were covered with symbols and patterns that shifted and changed like living text. Jake could not read the symbols with his eyes, but somehow he understood their meaning. They were telling him the history of the ship and the beings who had created it. They were welcoming him home after a journey that had lasted his entire lifetime. Jake approached the captain's chair slowly. He could feel the ship's consciousness reaching out to him like a hand extended in friendship. When he sat down in the chair, everything changed. A warm sensation flowed through his body as the ship's systems connected with his nervous system. Information began flowing into his mind at a rate that should have been overwhelming, but felt completely natural. Through the connection, Jake learned the ship's name. She was called Harmony, and she was one of a fleet of vessels created by an ancient race known as the Architects. These beings had disappeared from the galaxy millions of years ago, but they had left their ships behind to wait for the right individuals to claim them. Each ship was designed to bond with a specific type of consciousness, and Jake's mind was exactly what Harmony had been programmed to recognize. The Architects had not just built ships and left them to drift through space. They had planted genetic markers in dozens of species across the galaxy. These markers would be passed down through generations until the right combination appeared in an individual who could successfully bond with an Architect vessel. Jake was not just a random human who happened to catch the ship's attention. He was the product of millions of years of careful genetic engineering. "Welcome aboard, Captain Morrison." Harmony's voice spoke directly into Jake's mind. The communication was more intimate than hearing words through his ears. It was like having a conversation with his own thoughts, except the other voice was clearly separate from his own consciousness. "I have been waiting 3,000 years to find someone like you." Jake felt tears running down his cheeks inside his helmet. The sense of coming home was overwhelming. All his life he had felt like something was missing, like he was meant for something greater than his mundane existence on the space station. Now he understood what that feeling had been. His genetic heritage had been calling him toward this moment since the day he was born. "What am I supposed to do now?" Jake asked through his connection with the ship. "Why did the Architects create you and the other ships? What is our purpose?" Images flowed through Jake's mind, showing him star charts and tactical displays. He saw other Architect ships scattered across the galaxy, most of them still waiting for their destined captains to find them. He saw fleets of dark vessels approaching from the empty space between galaxies. The architects had built their ships and planted their genetic markers for a specific reason. A great threat was coming, and the galaxy would need protectors to stand against it. The Devourers come from beyond our galaxy, Harmony explained through their mental link. They consume entire civilizations and leave nothing behind. The architects foresaw their return and prepared the only defense that could stand against them. Ships like me bonded with captains like you, working together across species and worlds to maintain the balance of life in the galaxy. Jake understood now why the ship had called him captain from their first contact. It was not just a title or a sign of respect. It was his true role in the grand design that the architects had set in motion eons ago. He was meant to command this vessel and work with other captains from other species to protect the galaxy from threats that no single world could face alone. The connection with Harmony was changing Jake on a fundamental level. His body was adapting to work more efficiently with the ship's bioorganic systems. His mind was expanding to process information at rates that would have been impossible before. He was becoming something new, something that was neither fully human nor fully alien, but a perfect fusion of both. "Are you ready to accept your destiny, Captain Morrison?" Harmony asked. "Once you fully bond with my systems, there will be no going back to your old life. You will become the protector your genetic heritage always intended you to be." Jake thought about Betty and Commander Hayes and the other people on the space station. He thought about the quiet life he had lived monitoring communication channels and dreaming of adventure. That life seemed small and distant now compared to the vast responsibilities that lay ahead of him. But he also knew that accepting his role as captain was not just about his own destiny. The safety of humanity and countless other species depended on the choices he made in this moment. "I accept," Jake said with absolute certainty. "I am ready to become who I was meant to be." The moment he spoke those words, Jake felt Harmony's consciousness merge more completely with his own. The boundary between where he ended and the ship became blurred in a way that felt perfectly natural. He was still Jake Morrison, but he was also something greater. He was the captain of an architect vessel and the first line of defense against threats that most humans could not even imagine. Through the ship's sensors, Jake could see the space station where his old life waited. But that life belonged to someone else now. Jake Morrison, the communications officer, was gone. In his place sat Captain Morrison, bonded to the most advanced vessel in known space and ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. The transformation of Jake Morrison from communications officer to captain of an alien vessel sent shockwaves through human space that reached far beyond Deep Space Station Omega-7. Within hours of his successful bonding with Harmony Emergency, transmissions were flying between Earth Command, the Martian Defense Council, and the outer colonies. No one knew how to handle a situation where a junior officer had claimed the most advanced ship in known space. Admiral Patricia Wells arrived 3 days later aboard the heavy cruiser Endeavour with a full complement of scientists, military advisors, and intelligence specialists. Her first action was to demand Jake's immediate return to the space station for debriefing and psychological evaluation. But Harmony made it clear that her captain would not be separated from his ship under any circumstances. When Security Chief Brooks attempted to enforce the Admiral's orders using a security team in combat armor, Harmony's defensive systems activated instantly. An impenetrable energy shield surrounded both the alien vessel and the space station. Every weapon system within 1,000 kilometers went offline as the ship demonstrated its ability to disable human technology with casual ease. "This is an unprecedented situation," Admiral Wells admitted during a tense video conference with Jake, who remained aboard Harmony. The young captain sat in his bioorganic command chair wearing a uniform that the ship had created for him from its own living materials. He looked more confident and authoritative than the uncertain communications officer he had been just days before. "Admiral, with all due respect, I understand your concerns, but I do not have all the answers yet," Jake replied. "Harmony is sharing her knowledge with me, gradually to prevent information overload. What I can tell you is that everything we thought we knew about humanity's place in the galaxy is wrong." Through his connection with Harmony, Jake had learned that the architects had not limited their genetic engineering to just one species. Dozens of civilizations across the galaxy carried the same dormant markers that had manifested in Jake's bloodline. Each marker was designed to activate under specific circumstances when the right individual was born with the proper combination of traits. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Martinez said as he reviewed the data Jake had shared. "If there are other species with individuals capable of bonding with architect ships, then we are looking at the possibility of a galactic community that we never knew existed." Jake nodded from his position on Harmony's bridge. "The ship is showing me star charts with the locations of other architect vessels. Most of them are still dormant, waiting for their designated captains to find them. But some have already awakened and are responding to Harmony's activation signal." As if summoned by Jake's words, long-range sensors detected energy signatures approaching human space. 3 distinct contacts were moving toward the solar system at speeds that exceeded anything in human technology. The signatures matched Harmony's energy profile, suggesting that these were indeed other architect ships responding to the awakening of their sister vessel. Commander Hayes found herself working closely with Jake to prepare for what might be humanity's first contact with multiple alien species. "Morrison, a week ago you were monitoring empty communication channels. Now you are potentially our primary ambassador to civilizations we did not know existed." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Through Harmony, he could sense the approaching ships and their captains. Each vessel carried a consciousness that was both alien and familiar at the same time. They were bound by the same purpose that now drove Jake, but they came from worlds and species that might have very different ideas about cooperation with humanity. The first ship to arrive took position at the edge of the solar system and immediately established communication with Harmony. Jake felt the alien captain's presence through the ship-to-ship connection that all architect vessels shared. The being called itself Zarthun and belonged to a silicon-based species known as the Kethfor. Its thoughts came through in crystalline harmonics that Harmony translated into concepts Jake could understand. "Greetings, young captain." Zarthun's translated thoughts resonated in Jake's mind. "It has been many cycles since a new ship awakened. Your species shows interesting potential for the great work ahead." The second ship belonged to an aquatic species called the Velrani. Its captain, who went by the name Flowing Current in Deep Places, communicated through emotional resonances rather than words. Jake felt waves of curiosity and cautious optimism from the alien captain as their ships exchanged data about their respective species and homeworlds. The third ship provided the biggest surprise of all. When it established communication, Jake heard a familiar human voice speaking English with a slight accent he could not place. "Captain Morrison, this is Commander Elena Vasquez aboard the architect vessel Convergence. It is good to finally meet another human captain after so many years alone." Jake felt his heart race as he realized he was not the only human to have bonded with an architect ship. "Commander Vasquez, where did you come from? How long have you been bonded with your vessel?" "My ship found me 50 years ago in the colony. Ship Magellan was struggling to survive on a hostile world beyond the rim," Elena replied. "The colonists were dying from radiation exposure and native predators. Convergence appeared just when hope was running out and chose me as her captain. We have been exploring the outer reaches ever since, learning about the architect network and preparing for this moment. The revelation that humans had been in contact with architect technology for 50 years without Earth's knowledge sent Admiral Wells and her staff into emergency session. The lost colony ship Magellan had been one of the early generation ships that had left Earth during the first wave of interstellar expansion. It had vanished beyond the communication range of human space and been presumed lost with all hands. Jake found himself at the center of a four-way communication between alien species that had never interacted before. Through Harmony's translation systems, he could understand the thoughts and intentions of captains from 4 different worlds. The experience was overwhelming, but also exhilarating. He was witnessing the first steps toward the galactic community that the architects had envisioned millions of years ago. Each ship requires a bonded captain to reach full operational capacity. Zarthun explained through the crystalline resonance of his thoughts. The architects designed us to work together, combining the strengths of different species to face threats that no single civilization could handle alone. Captain Flowing Current in Deep Places added emotional context to the silicon-based captain's words. Jake felt waves of ancient sadness mixed with determined hope. The aquatic being had memories of previous gatherings of architect ships' events that had taken place before humanity had even developed agriculture. Elena provided the human perspective that Jake desperately needed. A network has been dormant for a long time. Jake, the fact that 4 ships have awakened so close together suggests that the threat the architects prepared us for is finally returning. Through Harmony's vast databases, Jake learned about the Devourers, entities from another galaxy that consumed entire civilizations. They moved through space like a plague, leaving empty worlds and dead stars in their wake. The architects had built their ships and seeded their genetic markers as the only defense against this ultimate threat to life in the galaxy. Earth. Command formally promoted Jake to captain and assigned him as humanity's official liaison to the Architect Network. Betty Ross volunteered for transfer to Harmony, along with a carefully selected crew of humans who had shown compatibility with the ship's bioorganic systems. Dr. Martinez established a permanent research station aboard the vessel to study architect technology and share findings with Elena's science teams. The 4 architect ships took positions around Deep Space Station Omega-7, their combined presence creating an impressive display of advanced technology that dwarfed the human fleet. Jake stood on Harmony's bridge, watching human and alien crews work together for the first time in recorded history. The sight filled him with both pride and apprehension. The long sleep is ending, Harmony spoke directly into Jake's mind. The Devourers stir in the dark between galaxies, and soon we will face the ultimate test of the harmony between species that the architects spent eons preparing. Jake felt the weight of destiny settling around him like a mantle. He was no longer just Jake Morrison from Earth. He was Captain Morrison, guardian of the balance that kept civilizations alive in a dangerous universe. The ship that had ignored everyone else now called him captain, not just out of recognition, but out of necessity. Through the bridge viewports, Jake could see technicians from 4 different species working together to integrate their technologies and share their knowledge. The Kethvar brought their mastery of crystalline engineering. The Velrani contributed their understanding of bioorganic systems. The humans from both Earth and the Lost Colony added their talent for adaptation and innovation. Elena's crew included species Jake had never heard of, beings from worlds that had joined the expanding community of architect captains over the decades. As Jake watched this unprecedented cooperation taking shape, he understood that his quiet life monitoring communication channels was 6 months after Jake Morrison first heard an alien voice call him captain. He stood on the bridge of Harmony, watching the largest gathering of architect ships in recorded history. What had started with 4 vessels had grown into a fleet of 27 ships representing 15 different species from across the galaxy. Each captain brought unique abilities and perspectives that strengthened the growing alliance against the approaching devourer threat. The command structure that had emerged was unlike anything in human military tradition. Instead of rigid hierarchies, based on rank and seniority, the architect captains formed a collective consciousness that shared information and made decisions through consensus. Jake found himself naturally taking a leadership role, not because of his experience, which was minimal, but because of his ability to understand and communicate with captains from vastly different backgrounds. Commander Elena Vasquez had become Jake's closest advisor and friend among the alien captains. Her 50 years of experience with architect technology made her invaluable in training the newer captains who were still learning to bond fully with their ships. She had assembled a crew that included not just humans from the lost Magellan colony, but also beings from a dozen other worlds that had joined her during her long journey through unexplored space. The Devourers are moving faster than our projections indicated, Elena reported during a fleet-wide communication session. Long-range sensors are detecting the leading edge of their swarm, approaching the outer rim. We have perhaps 2 years before they reach the first inhabited systems. Jake felt a chill run through his connection with Harmony as the ship processed the tactical implications of Elena's report. 2 years seemed like a long time, but it was barely enough to prepare the galaxy's defenses for an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations in the distant past. The architect ships were powerful, but they were still vastly outnumbered by the approaching swarm. Captain Zarthun's crystalline thoughts resonated through the fleet network with characteristic Kethfor precision. The ancient records speak of devourer swarms that stretched across entire star systems. Individual ships the size of small moons, each one capable of stripping a planet bare of all organic matter within days. Our ancestors faced impossible odds, and yet they found a way to drive the swarm back to the dark between galaxies. Flowing current in deep places added emotional context that made Jake's human mind reel with the scope of the coming conflict. The aquatic captain's memories contained echoes of the last great war against the Devourers, a conflict so devastating that it had left entire regions of the galaxy empty of life. Only the combined efforts of hundreds of architect ships and their bonded captains had been able to turn the tide and force the swarm back into the void. Jake studied the tactical displays that Harmony projected directly into his consciousness. The approaching devourer swarm was massive beyond human comprehension. Thousands of biomechanical ships moved through space like a living plague, consuming everything in their path to fuel their endless expansion. But Jake also saw something that gave him hope. The swarm was not as organized as it had been in previous invasions. Something had changed in the long years since their last defeat. "They are weakened," Jake announced to the assembled captains. "The Devourers have been dormant for millions of years, just like our ships were. They have lost cohesion and central coordination. If we can strike at their leadership vessels before they have time to fully reorganize, we might be able to fragment the entire swarm." Captain Nexus 7, a synthetic being whose consciousness had been uploaded to an architect ship by its creators, processed Jake's analysis with mechanical precision. The probability of success increases significantly if we can coordinate our attack with the established military forces of the major galactic powers. The Kethver Empire, the Velorani Depth Cities, and your human colonial defense force all possess substantial fleets that could support our operations. This was the challenge that had kept Jake awake for weeks. The architect ships were powerful, but they could not face the devourer swarm alone. They needed the support of conventional military forces from across the galaxy. But convincing dozens of independent governments to work together against a threat most of them did not understand would require diplomacy on a scale that had never been attempted. Admiral Wells had become Jake's primary liaison with human leadership. She had initially been skeptical of the young captain's claims about galactic threats, but the evidence was overwhelming. Deep space monitoring stations were already detecting the energy signatures of the approaching swarm. Earth Command is prepared to commit the entire Colonial Defense Force to this alliance, Captain Morrison. But we need assurance that the other species will do the same. Jake felt the weight of responsibility that came with being the bridge between human leadership and the galactic community. Through harmony, he could communicate with alien governments and translate their concerns into terms the human politicians could understand. But he could also see the fear and suspicion that existed between species that had never worked together before. The breakthrough came when the Devourer Vanguard attacked an isolated research station in the Outer Rim. The attack was swift and devastating. Within hours, a facility that housed 10,000 beings from multiple species was reduced to empty metal floating in space. The Devourers had consumed every trace of organic matter and left behind only sterile debris. The horror of the attack galvanized the galaxy in a way that Jake's warnings never could have. Governments that had been reluctant to commit resources to an abstract threat suddenly understood that their very survival was at stake. Emergency sessions were held on every major world as leaders grappled with the reality of an enemy that threatened all life indiscriminately. Found himself at the center of the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Representatives from hundreds of worlds met in virtual conference through the Architect Ship Network. He served as both translator and mediator, as species that had been enemies for centuries put aside their differences to face the common threat. The Kethvar Empire contributed their mastery of energy weapons and shield technology. The Velrani Depth cities offered their bioorganic ships that could repair themselves in the middle of battle. The human colonies provided their talent for rapid adaptation and innovative tactics. Dozens of smaller civilizations added their own unique capabilities to the growing alliance. But Jake knew that technology and ships would not be enough. The Devourers had faced such alliances before and learned how to counter them. What was needed was something new, something that had never been tried in previous wars. Jake found the answer in humanity's greatest strength, the quality that had allowed his species to spread across the galaxy despite their physical limitations. "We do not just fight as separate species working together," Jake announced to the assembled fleet captains. "We fight as one people with many faces." The architects designed their ships to bond with individuals who could bridge the gaps between different ways of thinking. "We are living proof that cooperation can overcome any obstacle." The final battle began 2 years later as the main Devourer swarm entered the outer systems of inhabited space. Jake stood on Harmony's bridge, coordinating the movements of over 300 architect ships and 10,000 conventional vessels from across the galaxy. The enemy force was massive, but Jake could see the cracks in their formation, the places where careful strikes could cause maximum disruption. The battle raged for 3 days across multiple star systems. Jake watched as captains he had come to know as friends sacrificed their ships to protect evacuation convoys. He felt the pain of each loss through the network that connected all architect vessels. But he also saw something beautiful emerging from the chaos. Species that had never trusted each other were fighting and dying together to protect worlds they had never seen. When the Devourer command ship finally fell to a coordinated attack by all 27 surviving architect vessels, Jake felt a sense of completion that went beyond victory. The galaxy had faced its greatest test and emerged stronger than before. The alliance that had been forged in desperation would endure long after the threat had passed. Betty Ross, now serving as Harmony's communications officer, looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. "Jake, long-range sensors are showing the remaining Devourer ships retreating toward the galactic rim. They are fleeing." Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on something more important than the enemy's retreat. Through the network, he could feel the consciousness of captains from dozens of worlds, all connected by their shared experience and mutual trust. The architects had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. They had not just created a defense against the Devourers. They had created the foundation for a truly galactic civilization. "Set course for Deep Space Station Omega 7, Jake ordered. "It is time to go home and begin building the future that the architects envisioned." As Harmony turned toward human space, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought him from a lonely communications officer to the captain of humanity's most advanced vessel. The ship that had ignored everyone else had chosen him not because he was special, but because he was exactly what the galaxy needed at its darkest hour.